After attempting to defend their poster campaign designed to prevent rape and sexual assault, the Sussex Police Department eventually caved in and apologized, saying they would foreshorten this particular part of the campaign. The problem with the posters in this campaign designed to prevent rape and sexual assault, we are to believe, is that they blame the victim by suggesting that women can help prevent rape by sticking together and not leaving friends behind. If the reader's memory, or listener's memory, I'm reading from a script here, is acute, then this argument about the dangers of victim blaming might be familiar, as they were alluded to by Jackson Katz from the previous post, and defended in that video through the manipulation of grammar. So where did this concept of victim blaming as evil come from? The listener might be surprised to learn that this notion is much younger than what one might otherwise suspect, given the broad and deep expeditions into the nature of justice by minds such as Plato and Locke and Mill and Nietzsche and others over the last several dozen centuries. Its first iteration as a concept appears to have come from Theodor Adorno of the Frankfurt School in 1947, from his characterization of the fascist personality type. Fascists dislike people that are weak, and so if someone is victimized, Adorno posited that the fascist is likely to find some justification for why the victim, weak as they are, might have deserved whatever was coming to them, as proven by the fact that they were victimized. The actual phrase victim blaming comes from 1971 in a book by William Ryan called Blaming the Victim. It was written as a rebuttal to the 1965 Moynihan Report, which posited that historical oppression had resulted in dysfunctional social patterns within the Black American family. Dysfunctional social patterns that resulted in absentee fathers, poor education, underemployment, and a generally undesirable standard of living for Black America. So in essence, Moynihan blames slavery and racism for a society that, through systematic forces, inculcated bad family values into Black culture, and he argued for the reversal of this through governmental programs supporting the same. Now, this attitude, according to Ryan, somehow put the blame upon the Blacks for the predicament, hence the title. How Moynihan's conclusion justifies racism and justice against Black people, as Ryan argues, is unclear to me. Granted, I haven't read either of these books. I'm merely skimmed the summaries. But we're talking about the principle here. And the only way I can imagine it is if you include the conservative notions of Bush's soft racism of low expectations, but I don't think that's the sort of racism Ryan is referring to. Nevertheless, the emotional punch behind imagining people being twice victimized sticks, and it grew into the popularity that it enjoys today. So, in short, the concept has been misleading and possibly outright dishonest from its very conception. So the way the phrase is used today is most presciently and tellingly described by the YouTube feminist Laci Greene. I'm going to play that video for you real quick.
If you didn't want your photos stolen, you shouldn't have taken them. What was she thinking going out dressed like that? She could have left, but she didn't. It's her own fault she has a black eye now. I mean, let's be honest, she was kind of asking for it getting that drunk. Whoa! Hold up just a hot minute. What are you even saying right now?
We'll skip that.
Blameworthy offenses include going out at night, taking nude photos, wearing tight clothing, short skirts, being promiscuous, getting drunk. Notice anything about that list? Yeah, all those things that people claim are asking for it are actually rights and freedoms that every human being is entitled to. And when I say human, I do include women in that group. This is how bizarre victim blaming sounds to me. Your identity was stolen? Why were you using a credit card? If you had used cash, this never would have happened. They punched you in the face? Where was your protective reflective helmet? You were mugged? What were you wearing? A suit? Everyone's trying to make money. You don't have to flaunt the fact that you have some. It's basically asking them to steal from you. Okay, enough bad acting.
We're almost
You
to the
get
good
my
part,
drift?
don't worry.
The problem with blaming the victim is that it's the predator that caused the crime, not the victim or their clothing or their pictures. Fun fact, actually it's not that fun. Crimes happen when perpetrators choose to violate someone. Rape, sexual assault, theft, harassment, non-consensual distribution of sexual photos. Those are all decisions that someone made to violate another person.
So if you want to watch the rest of the 5-minute video, it's available in the original blog post, and I'll leave a link to it in the load bar. Needless to say, her explanation is not the most philosophically rigorous of the concepts, but no philosophically rigorous elucidation of the concept will go against the core argument that Laci makes about why victim blaming is bad. And her video covers most of the same ground about that all articulations of anti-victim blaming arguments go over. And it also happens to be among the most common kinds of arguments. The important quote here is the part where she says, the problem with blaming the victim is that it's the predator that caused the crime, not the victim or their clothing or their pictures. Crimes happen when perpetrators choose to violate someone. Rape, sexual assault, theft, harassment, non-consensual distribution of sexual photos, those are all decisions that someone made to violate another person. Indeed. Now, because risk behaviors are rights, we are to believe, the burden of responsibility for outcomes is entirely upon the perpetrator. Laci goes on to elaborate 5 distinct problems with victim blaming. It protects sexual predators, it invites more crime via number 1, it makes it harder for justice to be served. We'll save that for another video. It fuels misogyny in the context of sex crimes. This kind of, I think, alludes to Adorno's notion. And it gets victims to blame themselves. Ooh, what a powerful emotional argument there. Gosh, you wouldn't want to make a victim blame themselves, would you? Regardless, I applaud Laci's and all other advocates' emphasis on the personal responsibility of the perpetrator, something often withdrawn from conversations about crime. That said, there is a curious implication in this line of thought on the subject of responsibility, specifically the confusion between legal or moral responsibility and what we could call physical responsibility. When I lift my glass of bourbon to my lips, I am physically responsible for this action, and that I caused it to happen, regardless of whatever variety of legal opinions there might be about my relationship to that glass. Had I been ordered by a gun-wielding madman to bring that glass to my lips on pain of death, he might be legally and morally responsible for my actions in that case, but I would still remain physically responsible for the action in that my arm mechanically moved it. It's kind of a mechanistic understanding for what responsibility is. Now, a denial of this would mean the denial of the very personal responsibility Laci alludes to in proclaiming that the perpetrators bear the full responsibility, especially since criminal behavior can be predicted by certain traits in the same way that sexual victimhood can be. Sexual predators, for instance, have extremely high rates of childhood sexual abuse. Responsibility cannot so easily be consolidated and expanded and isolated. So recall the maxim from the first blog post. If you haven't read it, and I realize now that I forgot to say it in the first video, it's the beginning of all sophistry is the redefinition of words. And I think it bears repeating. The beginning of all sophistry is the redefinition of words. If this rings a bell, it's a corollary to Lao Tzu's famous the beginning of all wisdom is calling things by their proper names. And so to really understand this, you need to look at the way that they use responsibility. The beginning of all sophistry is the redefinition of words, and I think there's a little bit of that going on here. Now, to expand this, the logical conclusion of the anti-victim blaming mentality, the confusion of legal and physical responsibility, actually precludes police from arresting victims. Why is that? Well, because even in the performance of their job, the responsibility of the crime and its prevention is being placed on someone other than the criminal, i.e. you are not holding the criminal 100% responsible for the crime if you are putting someone else in charge of stopping people who do that. And let's not forget that law enforcement officers can be victims like anyone else. So anything short of expecting a perpetrator to turn themselves in voluntarily and ultimately to never commit any crime in the future necessarily involves putting partial physical responsibility for the prevention of crime on someone other than the criminal. Now, this need not mean putting moral responsibility on the cop or on the victim. So perhaps this is why those of the anti-victim blaming persuasion are ideologically forced to limit their anti-rape advocacy solely and only to teaching men not to rape. A farcical notion that rests on the notion that rapists are somehow ignorant of the illegality and immorality of their own behavior, which makes one wonder why they hide their activity from the public. But we need not accept the muddling of the line between moral and physical responsibility. A counselor, a friend, or acquaintance of a crime victim, when they try to help the victim sign up for a self-defense course or upgrade their home security or show them how to acquire a concealed carry permit, is not putting moral responsibility on the victim, but they're treating them as an agent with the power to act on their surroundings, which they physically are. This is the physical truth. While knowing self-defense and upgrading one's security or carrying a weapon is not an absolute guarantee of safety, it does significantly decrease one's odds of becoming a helpless victim of a criminal with no ability to protect yourself. The denial of this is not only a rejection of the agency of the victim, a rejection not so quickly accepted in the case of the perpetrator, it puts the ideology of absolute moral responsibility and abstract notions of rights and ideology over reality and over real human suffering that could be prevented by something as simple as sticking with your friends, as the Sussex Police Department's posters defended.